Right. Welcome everyone to our third invasive animal webinar. We'll just start kicking off as more people log in. This is our third in a series of webinars that we've been doing. Been doing about one every year. We've decided to do feral pigs this year. Our first guest speaker is Heather Channon. She is our National Feral Pig Coordinator, and she's here to speak to us on the greater problem of feral pigs nationwide. Help me in welcoming Heather. Thank you.
Good afternoon to you all. I'm just going to now share my screen when you've
stopped sharing. Yep, all yours.
I should have just sent it straight to you. Just gave me this. Where are we? Let's go there. Hopefully now. Now, hang on. I've just got to find the.
Beautiful.
Okay, just got to get the. I can't. Just bear with me. Right. Okay. You can see that now, Rita?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So thanks firstly for the opportunity this afternoon to speak to you about feral pigs. I'm going to speak with you about it from a national perspective, then drill it down to Queensland, and then try and work through some of the potential issues that landholders in your local government region may be facing with feral pigs. So this afternoon I'm focusing in on collaboration, coordination, commitment, and the importance of communication. Okay, now I've just got to work through how this, I'm going to move my slides because it's not doing what I want it to do. There we go. So in terms of feral pigs and what they're able to do to the environment and to agriculture, as well as to social assets, I've included this slide mainly to help with setting the scene so that from an environmental perspective, there is a key threatening process under the EBPC Act, which you may also be hearing about at the moment with the Commonwealth Government working through reforms of that Act. But feral pigs jeopardise 148 nationally threatened species, and it's really difficult, of course, to work through that, and even from an agricultural perspective in terms of damage, because of the ubiquitous nature of feral pigs. They're sporadic in their impacts, and just being able to monitor and track impacts from pigs. And that remains an ongoing challenge that we're working with through the National Feral Pig Action Plan that I'll talk about shortly as well, to try and get more information about their impacts. So they also impact 8 threatened ecological communities across Australia, and to the environment, they spread weeds, impact on vegetation, compete for feed, do all sorts of damage. And so really it comes down to, with feral pigs, what they don't impact rather than what they do. From a social perspective, they damage culturally important sites across Australia. They also spread diseases to livestock, plants, and to wildlife, as well as, of course, to humans. So it's really important here to manage and be aware of that when you're dealing with feral pigs, because they can transmit diseases to us too. And they're impacting on environmental and recreational values. From an economic perspective, I'll talk about that a little bit more this afternoon as well. And I've just also mentioned already that they carry disease, and that can be exotic diseases, ones that Australia doesn't have, endemic diseases, ones that are already here and that can impact on agriculture and to livestock, zoonotic diseases, ones that can be transferred to and from humans. They damage pastures, crops and livestock by predation of lambs and goats, and sometimes to calves, damaging to on-farm and community infrastructure. They carries of many diseases. I've already mentioned that, and increasing soil erosion, reducing water quality due to rooting, wallowing, and other behaviours. So feral pigs in Australia are not a new problem. They have been here since the first fleet, when they brought them in and didn't fence them properly, and they went feral right back then, so over 200 years ago now. They inhabit about 45% of Australia's landmass, and their populations have increased, since drought, 5 years ago when that ended, in response to favourable weather patterns. And that's happened, with La Nina and other weather events. You'll notice here, of course, on this map that Queensland is covered with pigs, with feral pigs. And so the risks to agriculture, the environment, and to social assets in Queensland, are significant. From a management perspective, and Rita, of course, will be able to support you with this, is that feral pig management is a shared responsibility of all land managers to remove feral pigs to mitigate biosecurity risks. And in Queensland, the support and the regulation of the Act sits with local government. Just in terms of the current situation, really knowing exact numbers of feral pigs that are out there is very difficult. We've had the good weather and the good favourable seasonal conditions over the past few years now that will have raised feral pig populations, but to what extent is really unknown. We don't do a lot of monitoring, and so we are a lot of the times flying a bit blind. So the more information we can get and incorporating monitoring into your management programs is really critical to be able to firstly show that you're getting a reduction in feral pig numbers in your region, but also being able to reduce their impacts, which of course is really important, and that's why you're doing what you do. But this map just is a recent one that was released by ABARES in 2024. But again, it's showing here that the relative abundance of feral pigs is widespread and in large numbers across Queensland. The other two maps are really just showing the upper and lower confidence intervals around all that. It's statistical. I won't go into that right now, but really, from a management perspective, we still have a lot of work to do to control feral pigs across the state and across the country. So in terms of what their costs are, this is again national data that was put together by ABARES and released in 2023. This data is drawn from the pest, animal and weed survey that ABARES do every 3 years. And you'll note here that the cost of feral pigs in total is around $156 million a year, with costs of feral pig management being estimated at $110 million, and residual losses to agriculture, or the production losses and other things, that estimated at $46 million a year. It really, these data are conservative, really conservative estimates. My thinking is that it's much greater than this, and I'll talk about this very briefly later, but we have been talking to many industries as part of some current work that we are doing to really understand what we can do about reducing those losses to agriculture from feral pig damage. And really, these losses are extremely conservative, and I'd be surprised if it isn't much higher number. But again, this whole area suffers from a lack of information, and that's why ABARES used the data set that they have through the Pest, Animal and Weed Survey. This number does not include the costs to the environment. So in Queensland, what does it mean for Queensland? And I used this map here that was published by the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, or DPI now, back in 2014, and it's also in the National Feral Pig Action Plan. But really, again, it's just showing here, the distribution and the density of feral pigs across the state. And in your region, of course, you'll be able to see there that it's majority that the pigs will be, could be common in their density, and relative in between widespread and localized in different areas within it. So, it may be, of course, it's, habitat related, but you will find that, with seasonal impacts, that distribution and density may change. But in 2021, it was estimated that the feral pig population in Queensland was around 2.3 million. And the losses to agriculture in Queensland from that ABARES estimate of $156 million, that the cost to Queensland is about $95 million. So again, it's taking the brunt of the costs based on those estimates. Just talking through quite quickly about the pig itself. It's really dependent on water. So, it requires water to live, and permanent sources of water are great. So, of course, as when there's plenty of water out there, the pigs can disperse into the environment and increase the areas that they cover. When of course, in drought times, as water becomes more and more scarce, they will come into permanent sources of water. And that, of course, is the best time for feral pig management. But of course, we need to be able to think about how we control them in other times as well. But yeah, it's really around making sure, when their resources are tight, water and feed, that's the best time to control pigs. They do prefer vegetative cover for protection and shade. They are a very mobile animal, and Darren will talk about this a lot more in his presentation this afternoon. They're very resilient, they're extremely intelligent, and they're adaptive, which just means that they can cover different types, and as actually shown in the map before, they can cover and live in different areas, in different habitats, and different and really live within those boundaries. So it really just means that we need to be smart in how we manage them, and be consistent, and be ongoing in their control. They're opportunistic omnivores, which means that they are eating both vegetative matter and meat. They require a diet with a crude protein content of around 15%. And that means, of course, that they are looking in the environment all the time for foods with high protein content. So that may be, of course, when they start predating livestock to get that protein, or it may be, of course, that they're digging up different roots and tubers and eating grains and other things to maintain and get that protein they require for reproduction. They can become sexually mature for sows at around 25 kilo live weight, around 6 months of age. And I did hear actually Matt Gentle from DPI Queensland the other day say that he's even seen sows bearing young at as young at a live weight of even around 15 kilos, which is so different to a domestic sow. So just because they're small doesn't mean they can't become sexually mature and they're not capable of bearing young. So they can bear, sows can have 2 weaned litters every 12 to 15 months, and they can have, between 4 to 10, 4 to 12 piglets at a time, depending on their age, weight, and food supply. And they live for less than 5 years in total. So it really means focusing in on removing populations of young animals is really important, because that's where the majority of the animals in the environment will be between, say, 0 and 2 years of age. And so we need to make sure that we are focusing in on removal of groups, or large groups rather than individuals, to have any chance at controlling feral pig populations across, in the environment. Because you can see here, of course, they have the capacity to reproduce very quickly. So in my role, and what I'm doing, is that the Commonwealth Government has funded the National Feral Pig Management Coordinator Program. It's been going on now for around 5 years. Its role, and my role, is to help facilitate and support strategic regional coordination for sustained best practice management of feral pigs. It's about raising community awareness of feral pig issues and capacity to apply humane best practice management, and that just means the methods we have available, being able to apply those effectively, humanely, at the right time and consistently is really important, and supporting land managers in being able to do that. Being able to progress the adoption of these management tools and methods, and address knowledge gaps through research and development and extension programs, and being able to support and encourage people to apply for those, and of course doing whatever I can to drive effective and ongoing investment. One thing I should say here is that the program supports me, and at the moment I don't have a support officer, but the new wave of funding that's hopefully coming through will do that. But so really it's around this program supporting me. I don't have funding out there broadly to support ongoing programs, but whatever I can do to help support programs in the community, please just get in touch. I'm always happy to discuss those, raise awareness, provide letters of support, anything I can do to do that. One of the key deliverables really early on in the program was the development of the National Feral Pig Action Plan that was done back in 2020, and and it was endorsed by the National Biosecurity Committee in October of 2021. This plan is available on the National Feral Pig Action Plan's website for downloading, but the whole purpose of this plan is setting out the objectives and goals and the actions that are required to actively suppress or eradicate where that's feasible, such as on islands, feral pig populations to reduce their impacts on our environmental, agricultural, cultural and social assets. And there are the plans divide up into 3 strategic goals and into 3 sections. Sorry, excuse my voice. One of them's around effective leadership, coordinated partnerships and strong governance. The next one's about community engagement and education. And the last one's around the on-ground work that's required to help increase the adoption of best practice methods and systems by land managers. And that's around, the R&D that's required, the work on ground to actually build those coordinated groups, what's required around monitoring, really all the practical what's happened, what's needed to help support land managers. But a lot of the work that I have done is around building partnerships, relationships, networks between everybody involved across Australia who's involved in feral pig management, because a lot of the work that is done has been done in isolation. No one really knows in other groups what's going on, even from neighbourhood to neighbourhood, about what's happening. But joining all that together, there's all the information that's out there, different approaches that are being used, and being able to share that between everybody to actually help to strengthen programs on the ground to improve their effectiveness, and really around that sharing of information and doing that from group to group is really important and being very powerful. And of course, any of the work that you're doing, I'm more than happy to share that as well. A lot of this, the really key part about this with feral pigs is working together, and I'm sure Darren will cover this off as well. So making sure that we've got coordinated action, everyone knows what's going on at the local level. Feral pigs move, in their home range. They can cross over many property boundaries. So just working by yourself will just mean that you're just doing, more and more and more work, but you're not necessarily controlling the problem at that regional or that local scale. So the more that we can work together and share intelligence and resources and sharing of labour and the equipment, everything else that's required with pig management is really key. A lot of that will require, building of those relationships. It requires trust, it requires commitment, and it requires good, effective communication. And that's all really easy to say. Doing it can be challenging. This work, it was shown back in some of the work that ABARES has done, is that only around 10% of land managers across Australia actually work collectively together to manage vertebrate pests. And I would suggest that a fair bit of that effort would be on wild dogs. And I'm thinking that the feral pig control and that collective management is far lower in that rate than say wild dogs. So we have a lot of work to do in this space, just trying to work through different land tenures and the differences in how we use the land and the enterprises that have been run on them. How many are impacted by pigs? Can you notice that damage? Does it impact particular land managers in their agricultural systems? That's also trying to work at that community level can be very difficult. And of course, then we've also got the public land managers as well. And so increasing the engagement at that local level with people involved in managing national parks, state forests, state parks, public land. It's a really complex system. So it's actually all about people as much as it is about pigs. So all the work we can do in helping to support local groups to form and to keep going is really important, because of course, a lot of effort is taken in actually getting those groups together, making sure that they continue to stay on board and people stay engaged is really important, because as soon as we stop take the pressure away from feral pigs and their management, the population can very quickly recover. So there is no silver bullet or one size fits all solution. I'd love to be able to say to you all, do this and it'll work. every system and every area across the country, and every community is different. But the one thing that everyone shares is that it takes at least 75% of reduction in feral pig numbers annually just to suppress the population growth and avoid the recovery in their population. So we all share that. Problem is we don't necessarily know how many pigs are out there in the first place. To know, of course, if we remove 50 or 100, 10, 1,000 from the environment, has that actually made a difference? And actually, have we achieved that population knockdown target that we need to achieve? So that, of course, is where monitoring is really important. There are many methods that are out there for how to control feral pigs, so using 1080 and sodium nitrite baits, aerial shooting, trapping, ground shooting, and exclusion fencing. And the primary ones of those really are baiting and aerial shooting, with trapping and ground shooting being treated or valued more as supplementary methods. But of course, if you need assistance in the methods of how to apply them, please reach out and we can connect you up with those, in the local level, at the local level, who may be able to help in that regard. But there are different types of traps that are out there, and there's new ones out there, and you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, a trap called the pig brig, and there's also one now, a competitor called the ball blanket mesh traps rather than steel ones. But and there's also feeders out there like the pig beta, which are pig-specific feeders for pigs that other animals can't access those, which means we can free feed pigs and then swap it over and add bait, and only the pigs will be able to access that bait and die. But really, it's about how we use all these tools at the right places, the right scales, in the right ways, at the right frequencies. And it's, yes, very easy for me to write that in a sentence, but it's really hard to do because we lack a lot of intelligence to know where the pigs are, how many are there, when is the right time, when does it suit people to do it. All of those things are really important, but really it's around not just necessarily relying on doing these things like once a year. We need to be probably doing it every 3 months within the breeding cycle of a pig, which is 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days. I should have added that into that earlier slide, but it really just means that if we don't get, don't keep that pressure up in that population, those animals can reproduce and have more pigs on the ground very quickly. So what does feral pig damage look like? And for some of you who may not be familiar with what feral pig damage looks like, we've got a fact sheet available on the National Feral Pig Action Plan's website, as well as other resources that are all available. And if you require other information at any time, please reach out and we'll pull that together for you. So it's, just because it's not there, we can always pull it together for you if you're wanting more information. But this is just one of the page one of that resource. But it covers off on what signs to look for, like rooting and digging, what pig hoof prints look like compared to say to deer and sheep and goats. You're looking at feral pig scat, which is their poo, and looking for sign of that in the environment. Apparent damage like to crops and pastures and wetlands is really apparent, and you can see that. You might be able to see, of course, wallowing in the environment, in dam banks too, for example, rub and tusk marks on trees, pig pads and game trails that will be in the environment, and they often will share them. So it might just be, there might be a sheep pad or a cattle pad, a trail that's used, but other animals, other invasive animals will use those same trails. So it's really about looking for sign of feral pigs in the environment. Hair and mud, such as hair attached to fences. I've already talked about wallows and their presence, say in dam banks or in creek beds. You may also see sign of predation of livestock, and often feral pigs may consume the whole carcass rather than leaving some of it behind. So you may not necessarily notice that that pigs are there because they've eaten the whole lamb, for example. And it comes down to sighting of pigs. Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there either, because they're very smart and they adapt their behaviours and when they're out in the environment to minimise the chances of being seen by humans, so that a lot of them will become active at night time rather than during the day. With all of this, of course, It's about collecting that information, not just collecting it, noting it. And there are tools out there such as the feral scan or feral pig scan that are free resources that information can be logged. If you do that, I suggest you contact Peter West, who's the coordinator of feral scan. Like, he can set you up as a private group so that information remains within that group and can't be seen publicly, and therefore attract, for example, unwanted hunters into the region. So there are ways of being able to collect this information, share it, and use it to help inform your program. I just thought too, and hopefully I've done this at a reasonable scale, Rita, but I just had a look today on a website looking at what the agricultural land use areas are in your region, and a lot of it looking like it's cropping, horticulture, and grazing. And so I'm just use that to actually help with pulling out some current information that we're collecting as part of that work, looking at reducing ag losses from pigs. I also will note that the local landholders in your region are working collaboratively with public land managers, and we featured an article about this in our recent newsletter in September, where we talked about feral pig control that was going on in the Glasshouse Mountains National Park, and the work going on and the collaboration that's happening with the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service, the Sunshine Coast Regional Council, and private landholders to control feral pigs in that region to protect environmental assets. But of course, feral pigs can be living in that interface between public land and using the private land as their food source, and the public land as where they sleep at night. So it's really around making sure that you have that collaboration, and it's great to see this collaboration that's going on between the different agencies to control feral pigs. So just very briefly, this project we're currently working on with support from the Commonwealth Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, and the purpose of this work is to examine how to reduce residual losses caused by feral pigs, and we're trying to put this together at an industry and state level. We're understanding what's needed to better support and engage land managers to consistently apply effective feral pig management over sustained periods, and looking to see what service information providers could be out there who are well placed to assist land managers, especially in areas of high impact. And what we did was we used a semi-structured questionnaire, and we've spoken to over 70 stakeholders across Australia. A lot of them are in Queensland, looking at we've spoken to primary producers, state and local jurisdictions, natural resource management agencies, biosecurity associations, particularly in Western Australia, where the system's a little bit different to the other parts of the country, to rural research and development corporations, service providers and contractors, and farming organisations. And the industries we've been involved and spoken to include sugarcane, macadamias, almonds, melons, citrus, bananas, fruit and vegetables, cotton, grain, pork, wool, sheep meat, goats, and feedlot and grass-fed cattle. And of course, it's not every industry involved. That's also reflective, of course, that feral pigs can impact lots and lots of them. But it's really about, just trying to manage the size of this project, given, of course, the range and the impacts that feral pigs can have in the different industries that they do impact. But what this work has shown from the interviews that we have done is that crop damage and economic losses to equipment on ground, on farms as well, infrastructure damage and biosecurity risks. But the top 4 reasons, and the damage is being caused by pigs to different agricultural sectors. It's really, I suppose, just reflective here of why we're doing what we're doing. But it's and importantly too, food safety was noted here, particularly for those industries where harvesting off the floor of off the ground, such as macadamias and almonds, and some high value horticulture. So Yeah, because as soon as it's contaminated by feces, it comes down to that product either can't be sold or it needs to be treated differently. Yeah, a lot of people, of course, will just wear costs of feral pigs, particularly noticing, of course, that happens mostly when commodity prices are high. When they're lower and industry's having a hard time, dealing with pigs becomes a lot more important and much more of a focus for producers. Excuse me for a minute, I just have to cough. And this is reflective, of course, this slide is reflective, of course, of what I've already talked about in terms of data. We don't collect data very well about losses caused to pigs. So if you can think about that and the type of information that you're able to collect for your own properties, as well as at a regional level, and doing that consistently over time is really important. I mean, we have tools available and information available, in terms of how to set up photo point monitoring. Information is out there about what you might be able to do to set up cameras in your area, in an area to look at feral pig presence, as well as changes in the environment, or to your crops and to your production systems. There's also even things like the use of drones, and these are just some of the comments that we obtained during our discussions from the people that we talked to. But you'll see here that around 45% of people didn't collect any information. Some people did, but not a lot of information. A lot of it just came from project-based data, and a lot of people, also over 20% of people, was anecdotal information. We just need to make sure, of course, if we were able to position the importance of feral pigs and why we need to be doing more work in this space, getting more clearer, consistent information about this will help you and also help me, and be able to promote and drive the need for ongoing support at a state and national level. The more information we have, the better it'll be, and the stronger position we'll be in. So there's a lot of work that's still required in this space because, of course, pigs can damage so many things. It comes down to, in that local area, what are the key things that we're wanting to be focusing in on? What can we measure consistently over time? I'm happy to have those discussions with you moving forward as well. And a lot of things, of course, is if you're a livestock producer, you may not necessarily see disease, but we do know that feral pigs can harbour leptospirosis and brucellosis, and you may not be seeing impacts from pigs, or thinking that the linking pigs with those diseases on your property, or seeing those losses, or of course you're actually vaccinating, so that's another cost because of pigs that you need to cover off on. So just looking at some of these local estimates, and they're not available at an industry or a state level really. So we've spoken to when we were talking to people about impacts from pigs, we saw that and we know that from some of the work that's been done in northwestern New South Wales, where the Northwestern Local Land Services, that's what LLS stands for, and with a company, an economic company there, they did an economic study, a company called Ag Econ. They saw there that there's a 12% land predation rate on average, with losses estimated at $10 million. Talking through this, how the ABARES data said $46 million annual losses in production per year. So with an individual, and we also know that when we're talking to people, they will talk about having losses in lambing about 50% due to pigs, knowing their enterprise sizes. They didn't tell us about that, but really they're being significantly impacted by pigs. A small cattle producer, this one was in Victoria, talked about extensive pasture damage to 161 hectare property, and in that year, in 1 year, just from being able to renovate those pastures and improve them again, cost $150,000, and an average $1,250 per hectare. So in intensive horticulture, we spoke to a vegetable grower who talked about losses annually of between $2.5 to $3 million in lost production because of feral pig damage to that crop. To melons, a grower talked about half a hectare of melons being destroyed every two to three times a year, and when you're using a yield around 65 tonnes per hectare at $1.50 a kilo, that ended up adding up to around $1.5 million a year to that property. And being able to get more industry level information would be fantastic. To citrus, when we were speaking to Citrus Australia as part of this project, they actually put out a national grower survey, which was fantastic of them to actually understand what the role and the where feral pigs sit as a cost to growers. 92% of the growers that they surveyed, and 25 of them responded, reported feral pig impacts over the past 12 months. 21% of them estimated costs of greater than $50,000. 29% of them, estimated losses between $20,000 and $50,000 a year. Another 29% said damage between $5,000 to $20,000. So other horticultural examples were, in northern Queensland, bananas removing up to 100 suckers a night, let alone damage to fruit or eating fruit. In macadamias, interestingly, that's where one pig, they said to me that one pig can consume up to 20 kilograms of macadamia nuts a night. And because they're harvested from the ground, it's really hard to know exact losses caused because of pigs to the macadamia industry. With pineapples, an individual property talked about 80,000 plants a season being impacted because of pigs, and it can be causing between $75,000 to $200,000 in damage. With pumpkins, losses of up to 25% in profitability due to damage to pumpkins from pigs. They can completely destroy new tree plantings, digging up roots and irrigation pipes, knocking over plantings, and this is in tree crops. And all of the issues around food safety I've talked about earlier on and mentioned that. And to think about protecting areas of high value horticulture. It's for many growers, it could be prohibitive if costs are between $10,000 to $12,000 per kilometre. And in some areas, it may be double that amount of money required for exclusion fencing to deal with differences in soil types, for example, in sandy areas, to be able to get the right type of equipment to keep that fence up. So in lots of areas across the country, people talked about impacts from pigs worsening, with a small number of reports of improvement, and that's of course reflective that there may be successful control programs being, that are underway. So I just wanted to finish with this, is that really it's really important here. People are the critical element for lasting success in feral pigs, and I'm sure, Darren will talk to you about this as well. But really it's, the important here about, bringing people together to deal with this. We can't deal with it by ourselves, and working together. The whole purpose of the National Feral Pig Action Plan, which I probably didn't talk about, is really about the collaborative need for, and the coordinated response to being able to apply those best practice management methods of baiting, aerial shooting, trapping, and ground shooting. Doing that in a landscape scale, which means at a local or regional level, and doing it across tenure, which is both private and public land managers involved, and trying to get as much land coverage covered by these programs as possible. If we end up with only 80% of the land involved in that project, in the program, the pigs know where the safe zones are, and that's where they'll go. So the more that we can cover and get people involved at that local level, involved in programs, or allowing access to be able to remove pigs from that area, the better. And that, of course, I know is really hard. So establishing trust is key. Identifying the key drivers for involvement. What is it about feral pigs? Why do people want to do something? And making sure we meet those needs and address those drivers. Setting clear goals is really important. Working together towards shared goals and having a good plan is really critical. using flexible, simple and practical management approaches. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. It's about using the approaches that we have. We might need to adapt them over time, but just doing it consistently is really important. Having all those consistent and shared messages and the communication's key. Being able, of course, and making sure that everyone knows how to apply the different methods well and what training might be required and what, and even talking to neighbours, well, what is it about that we can actually help to improve? And it's really about being patient and making sure that we continue over the long term to be involved in a group level in the local region to be able to apply feral pig management, and collecting and sharing good information is really, really important. So with that, I will leave you. No, we'll not leave you now, but that's the end of my presentation. But of course, my details are up here on the slide. If anyone wants to contact me at any time, please do. I'm more than happy to help in any way that I can. So thanks so much, Rita, and I hope that was what you were wanting.
Thank you, Heather. Certainly highlighting that feral pigs are having a large impact across our nation, not just our local area, and definitely needs the buy-in from everyone. I also forgot to mention in the beginning that if you have any questions throughout the sessions, please pop them in the Q&A section and we'll work through them at the end. Our next guest speaker is Darren Marshall. Darren is a lead researcher at the Centre of Invasive Species Solutions. He's here to share insights into feral pig research that he's been working on, including findings from recent studies on collaring data. Help me welcome Darren. Thanks, Darren.
Cheers, Rita. I'll just share this. How am I going there? Is that good?
Yep, we can see that. Thanks.
That's going. Okay. Hello, everybody. Well done, Heather. Thought I was going to have to bail you out there a few times. You've done well. I want to take a bit of a different approach, and look at the myth and the wonderment of feral pigs in the face of us trying to control these things. It makes it really difficult. I guess, hang on, I'm not going forward here. I'm going to have to stop sharing, I think, and go another way. How about I go? Is that working?
Yep, it's a video. It's working. Yep.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so we always assume that people want to get rid of feral pigs. The difficult part of the work that I've found out is people love these animals. People want them around them to the point that they will put them in the back of their trailer, bring them closer to home, and release them so they can hunt them much closer to where they are. It's not good, but it's just the truth. So everything that we do, we have to think about, how do we manage feral pigs knowing that we have neighbours, we have people not very far that want to hunt them, and that are always wanting these animals in the landscape. So we've got to be smart about how we implement any of these control measures. I'm just going to re-hit on a few things that Heather said. There's 100 pigs up there, and she said you've got to take out 75% of the population. So you just think about that for a minute. If you kill half the pigs in your entire region, if somehow we go out and kill half the pigs tonight, in 12 months we have had no impact on the population. That's because of their breeding rate. That's because of how fast they reinfest the landscape. And that's a real problem, because a lot of people are out there doing feral pig control, and they think they're doing a good job. But the sad part is they're just taking a few off the top, and they're making themselves feel like we're doing pig control, but they're not actually having any impact at all on that overall population. And then the important part, the impacts that they cause. So it's a bit hard. So we've collared a lot of pigs, and I want to show you this one. This one's in the Arcadia Valley, if anybody knows where that is, just below Rollston. This is a pig called Bender, and he was collared for 12 months. And each one of those little black squares, there's obviously a property outlined to 10,000 acres. We collared Bender, and this is what he did over a 12-month period. You can see he's running around. He's got a pretty consistent pattern. If you see up in the top right-hand corner, it says boundary crossings. In 1 year, that pig crossed property boundaries 556 times. So that makes it difficult. If one or two of the land managers were doing the best pig control they could possibly do, and they were doing everything perfectly on their properties, unless all of those properties that Bender covered, and assuming he's representative of all his mates, all work together, they would never be able to hit 100% of that population. They would never be able to control those feral pigs. So yes, you've got to get 75%, but yes, you've also got to do that 75% over a big enough footprint to have an impact on the population. That's where the collaring comes in for us. How big's that area? How big's that area at Kakadu? How big's that area in New South Wales? How big's that area for you? Because if we can work that out, then we know how many groups or how many landholders need to work together to actually have that impact. Because it's really easy to work with one or two landholders who are putting in everything, but the impact is not there because they need 3 or 4 others to work with them. Heather touched on some statistics. I've got a little few here, too, of 200 landholders we worked with. 60% said they do individual management, and just over 40% said they do nil tenure management. So that's a good start, but we really need to ensure that we get that nil tenure work, as Ben has just shown us how to do that. So those control techniques, Heather went through them. They're all effective, but the only two that are ever going to have an impact to bring down that initial 75% is often baiting and aerial shooting. But let's think about that. How practical is baiting and aerial shooting in your area? Is it too dense to aerial shoot? Baiting is always topical. Working dogs are valuable. How do we be smart about using these control techniques and getting that 70%, 75% knockdown that we need? And when we think about those methods, and back to these 201 landholders, I was really excited to see this data come in. We asked them, what do you think are the most effective control techniques? Look how good this is. Coordinated aerial shooting, coordinated ground baiting, exclusion fencing, trapping, all the way down, hunting, at the bottom, an individual aerial baiting, commercial harvesting, strategic ground shooting, all at the bottom. People know it's not effective. People know it's not going to take out enough pigs, and they know that aerial shooting and ground baiting and fencing is effective. Hey, I'm guilty too. On my property, I'm guilty too. I know what needs to be done. Next question. What's the control techniques you used in the last 12 months? It's an inverse of what we as landholders know is effective. It's easy to give permission to somebody to come hunting. It's easy to give that hunter permission to run traps. It's easy to let them aerial shoot. Commercial harvester wants to come on, go for it. Make sure you get the pigs while you're there. It's all those little pieces though that add up. And And there's fellas in New South Wales, some of these blokes, they say you can do something. No, you can do nothing. You can do something, or you can do something useful. And the sad part is 90% of feral pig control that we do in Australia at the moment doesn't get to that 75%. So what can we do to help land managers find where pigs are vulnerable in the landscape, help them target the animals, do anything we can to lift the kill rate to 75%? Because unless we get there, we know we're just breeding more and more pigs, as long as the season stays good. We all heard Heather say the best thing to kill pigs is drought. This is work we did with Jens a long, long time ago. This is the Queensland Murray-Darling Basin, but the concept here is the same, and you'll be able to follow it really easily. This is a dry summer, and on this map, if you look where the pink and the purple parts are, that's where sows can live and breed. So just remember that they can live and breed. So in a hot, dry summer, you can see they're really confined to the water lines. You can see the boundary there between New South Wales and Queensland, and then you can see those major river systems coming down. That's a hot, dry summer. A wet summer, it increases, but there's water. There's water there, so they can move that little bit more. And they're still confined to that water because it's still summer. The temperatures are still hot. Pigs don't have sweat glands. They've still got to wallow twice a day. In a dry winter, things change a bit. In a wet winter, and don't we love wet winters? So the difference between that dry summer and wet winter is just phenomenal. And you really notice it. You can see the pig damage. You can see the pig impact. When it's the middle of a roaring drought, people aren't talking about pigs. Now, when the seasons have been really good, people are just loving it. So what can we do to work with people, motivate people to actually hit those pigs in that hot, dry summer? Because if you could do the impact or do the control and have the impact, then you'd have to kill, if you killed 20 pigs, then it'd be more valuable than killing 20,000 pigs in a wet winter, because you've just got so much more bulk animal to take out. But it's really hard to motivate people to do something in a drought. I know exactly what that's like. So I wanted to use these GPS tracking collars to dispel myth and tell the truth. I believe most pig stories are driven by hunters and that mythical thrill of the chase of the pig and how far they travel and what they'll do and the great extremes they'll go to each night to get to a crop. So I wanted to find out the truth. So we've collared over 500 pigs now, and we're starting to get a bit of a feel across the country about what feral pigs do in different parts of the landscape. I can't say this is right for you, but I can say it's right for a lot of the parts of the country. We want to collar and follow pigs because we do want to learn about their ecology. We do want to know the scientific side of it. We want to know where they're most vulnerable in the landscape to control. But from a people point of view, what we want to do is dispel the myth, get rid of the pub talk, and tell the truth about where pigs go and what they do and how far they do actually travel. So, yeah, there's a bit of a map of where the current sites have been so far. We've got a few to add to that. But that's so when we're talking about the data that we're about to go into, where those stars are is the clusters of areas of where we've collared pigs. So what we do is we effectively find representative animals spread across the country, spread across the site, sorry. We drug the pigs to get the collar on because we want to make sure the collar stays on their neck because they're pretty hard to collar because they don't have a neck, basically. And we use that jab stick to knock them out. So this fella makes it really easy because he's just one pig in a trap. You hit him with that drug and he'll go to sleep in 2 to 3 minutes, and then we can work on him and do what we need to do. If we're ever lucky enough to do it in your area, this will be Rita's job now to go in and get that pig out, just to make sure he is asleep. And then we'll take DNA samples of him. We put an ear tag in them, so if honest hunters get them, we can get the collar back. And then we take all the weights, all the details, all the measurements that we can of that pig before we release him and let him go. And that's just important to show how fast and how quickly they can grow. As Heather said, they only live 5 years. That's getting the collar on. The bottom there's the battery pack, the GPS unit's up the top, and you've just got to get that right, or they'll throw it off. Get all that detail that we can. The most difficult thing, believe it or not, is keeping the pig alive, because they're overheating the whole time. So we've got to keep them wet. We've got to keep them good, keep them going, and then that fella will get up and run away, and then he'll give us data for the rest of his life. And what we work on is every half an hour. So every half an hour for the next 12 months. There he is. He's off. He's good to go collecting data for us. That one's in the Arcadia Valley. What we aim to do is have 15 collars per site, just so we know we've got a decent sample size. As I said, we do 30-minute fixes. So a waypoint's taken every half an hour, then every 6 hours that's shot up to the satellite, and then we get that. We do collar boars and sows, and large and old, large and small, down to about 40 kilos, just so we're representative of everything there. And you're seeing the ear tag going, you're seeing us take the DNA, and we test them for blood samples for leptobrucin, anything that might be relevant to that specific area. This is some of the data that comes back. It's pretty interesting that the top right-hand greenery there, you can see, is a national park. The bottom right-hand is also a national park. And we call it a whole heap of pigs in the centre of the screen. And there was a really strong belief that the pigs travelled a long way and lived in that national park and come to these land managers' cattle stations and crop. So we collared the pigs and let them go. Each different colour there is a different pig that's collared, and you can see up there about every second is a day. So you can see the movement. You can see the movement pattern of those pigs and what they're doing over time. And it's quite useful because it shows those land managers where the pigs are and what they actually do and where they go. It's sometimes a bit dull. They don't seem to go far, right? Like, they're not like dogs. They don't cover great distances. They stay in their home range. I think it's fair to say the core home range. No, I'll explain that after. Sorry, I'm jumping the gun there. But that shows visually how those pigs stay in a certain cluster. And if that group of 10 or 12 landholders did work together, they should be able to have a decent impact on that feral pig population because they're staying in their patch. Notice how often they're going into the bottom, the national park in the bottom right-hand corner and the national park in the top right-hand corner. Okay, we'll look at a bit of individual data now off each pig. That's just a daily movement pattern. That's not telling us a lot. But now if we have a look at this is showing core home range and home range. If you can see the purple blob and the green scribbly line, the green pig moving down the bottom in the purple blob, that's the pig that this data is relevant for. First, I'll explain the light green blobs. The light green blobs are that pig's home range. So he spends 90% of his time within that home range. So that's where 90% of his movement patterns are. So if I live in Toowoomba and most of my work's around the Darling Downs, say, and then I go for a trip to the state of origin in Sydney and I just go down for a night and back, then that won't be in my core home range or my home range because that's the 10%. All of my home range will just be in and around Toowoomba and the Darling Downs. Now, the important part here are the purple dots. Now, the purple dots are much smaller and much confined, and that's the pig's core home range. That's where the pig spends half of its time. Now, that's not 90%, it's half of its time, but the parts of the landscape are much more confined and much smaller. So that tells us if we wanted to target that pig, we need to go to where those purple dots are. And it's very, very interesting to compare that with local knowledge and where landholders already have their traps or their bait sites or where they send the choppers. So that's the home range and core home range. This is a similar map, and the home range is the black outline, the larger, and you can see the purple. The purple blobs are a core home range. This is of one pig. Now, what the dots are over the top of that is seasonal data. Like every half an hour, they take a point, and each of those points is coloured depending on the season. So orange is autumn, red is summer, green is winter, and yellow is spring. So you can really see there that in different parts, different times of the year, pigs are concentrated in different areas. So if you controlled and wanted to target that pig on the left-hand side there, and you hit him in autumn, you'd do a fantastic job. You'd control that population really well. But if you went there any other time of the year, in summer, winter, or spring, they wouldn't be there at all. And I know I'm guilty of it. If I had success there in autumn, I know every other time, every other part of the year, I'd leave my trap there and I'd keep it set there. But once I get this data, I know where to move it to. I know which parts of the landscape those pigs use, and I can then target my control efforts to align with where they're spending their time in the landscape to hopefully increase my kill rate to that 75%. I just want to show another pig here. This is in deep, deep, deep forest down in southern New South Wales, just to show them they're not all out in the open, productive country. Nearly 95% of the pigs we collar are, but this pig is shown, you can see on the left there, that's really steep terrain, and you can see that pig, how he just works that country. And for the whole 12 months he's collared, he doesn't leave. He doesn't leave that thick, dense forest. And you can see his seasonal data there on the right. I just want to finish by showing what happens when you put a chopper up. What happens to the pigs? What do? So these pigs, these are 17 pigs with New South Wales with a simulated foot and mouth disease program. And each different colour there again is a different pig in that similar site. And just watch them all run around. They're not doing much. They're really comfortable. And what these guys did was they aerially shot this site for the first week of every month for 4 months. Now I'm going to show you the third shoot here. You'll see a blue line come in a minute, and you'll see the helicopter flying over all of these pigs. There it is. Have a look at what the pigs do. It's really interesting to me that these pigs were, as I said, they were aerially shot for the first week of the month for 4 months. For the next 3 weeks, they were trapped and baited. Of those 17 pigs, only one left its existing and original home range. It just blows me away. Even under all of that pressure of being shot from a chopper every month, the pigs still stayed at home. So, we need to think about our control. We need to think about what's effective, and we really need to think about how far pigs actually move in the landscape. Rita, I reckon I'm going to pull up and I'll hopefully get some questions. Stop sharing.
I'll put my microphone down. Thanks, Darren. Always so interesting listening to all of your stories. Next up is myself, not as quite interesting. So I'm Rita Everitt. I'm acting team leader for the feral animal team in Sunshine Coast Council. I'm just going to do a brief overview of how Council can assist landholders in this space and some projects that we've been working on. So I'll just share my screen. I'm having the same problem as you, Darren. There we go. Can everyone see my screen?
All good,
so.
Rita. All
okay,
good.
Thanks, Dan. So yeah, we're just going to recap on a bit of what Heather and Darren have already talked about. So when it comes to invasive species management, especially in our peri-urban areas, there's a lot of different things that impact on our wildlife and our communities, our landholders. Unfortunately, invasive species is just one of the only things that my team can actually help with in that way. For a lot of people, they don't really comprehend or understand that invasive species are actually one of the highest things that are impacting our wildlife. So in this study, it shows that invasive species are affecting 82% of our threatened species, which is pretty high. When a lot of people think of endangered and threatened species, they really usually think of, we need to go and pick up rubbish off the beaches, and we need to stop polluting, and climate change and all of that. Sometimes their first thought is not actually invasive species. So we kind of need to change that education point there. So quickly, local government, we're governed by our Biosecurity Act, and these are the priority species listed in our biosecurity plan that we can assist landholders with. So note that Indian minor birds isn't in the Biosecurity Act, but our team still sees them as a species that needs to be managed, and they do have a big impact on our local bird populations. So pigs are just one of our priority species in our local government area. Quickly, we're a team of 9, at the moment 8. We're a fairly small team for what we cover. So we include a team leader, and I'm sitting between the team leader and the biosecurity tech role at the moment. We have a feral animal baiting specialist, 2 feral deer officers, and 4 feral animal officers. So when we're talking about pigs, it's really only I have 4 officers to cover the whole Sunshine Coast region, and pigs are not the only thing that they work on. So I like this representation. I do this a fair bit in my presentations, just to show the different kind of jobs that my, mainly my feral animal officers could be dealing with on a daily basis. So if you look at the map, the colours represent the different species. So on that map, every single triangle is a piece of equipment that has gone in the ground since 2016. So there's not that many places that equipment hasn't gone in at some point. So if you take out the big green areas, which is National Park, which is lovely to have in our area, and as Heather was nice enough to mention, we have a really good working relationship with national parks. You can kind of see that there are certain kind of zones that certain species stick to. So if we're focusing on feral pigs, you can see that there is kind of a niche area that the feral pigs seem to impact on. And we have specialised programs that target particular species. So one of our conservation programs that we're pretty proud of is the Merry River Turtle Protection Program. And part of that program, we target most of our priority species, but pigs included. So 90% of Merry River turtle eggs are actually predated upon by invasive species, including pigs. So they not only can predate the eggs and the hatchlings, they can also trample and squish the eggs, same as deer, and when they're causing erosion and that type of thing when they're up and down the river. So that's one of our programs that feral pig management in itself works towards helping another larger conservation program. So coming back to focusing on pigs, so these are some of our results since 2016. So over the last decade, our pig results have really kind of fluctuated, but it kind of has a downward trend, which doesn't mean that our pig problems are decreasing. It doesn't really mean that we're having any less luck in getting pigs either. I mean, we have 82 this year and we had 82 last year. And as Darren was good to point out in his data, it really does seem to fluctuate with the climate and the weather. So we've had a lot of wet seasons here on the Sunshine Coast in the last couple of years. And as both the guest speakers have said, if we don't get that population cut down, are we really having an impact? So it's not really about how much effort we're putting in or that we're not doing a good job. It's just that it's kind of hard to do pig management, especially if we're not having that coordinated approach. Whereas if you look at our feral pig customer requests that come into council, it's basically, it has fluctuated, but if you look at it on a trend line over the last decade, it really hasn't changed that much. We're not getting an explosion and we're not getting a decrease either. So if we look at the map as I go along, each turn of the wheel is a different year. So the triangles are the same as before. They're equipment that has been put in the ground in response to feral pigs. Don't mind the colour, that's just a colour change of the year. And the circles are where a result has happened. So this is 2017 now. You can see that there has been a move away from the coast of, you could assume, impacts. So it doesn't tell us all that much unless you look at all the years over the time. But we do have a predominant kind of impacts and stuff in the western areas of our shire. There isn't a lot going on in the very peri-urban areas, which is what we would expect to see. We don't really see feral pigs roaming up and down the Mooloolaba beach. Did have some cameras because there was a supposed sighting in City Downs. I don't know that it actually ever related to anything. And this is, I think this is coming to last year, and I think this is this year. So as Darren kind of said, the home ranges and that type of thing don't really move that much. So it's not unexpected to see that we haven't had a big movement in the impacts that we see on the Sunshine Coast. This is kind of just to show that I pulled some data from our customer request by locality. So these particular localities on the Sunshine Coast have actually increased. So the impacts of pig movement into those areas or the reporting of impacts has actually increased over the last decade. Whereas all of these have either been neutral or a slight decrease. This is what we would prefer to see, but unfortunately that's not always the case. So with any of our priority species, we've been trying to encourage landholders to do what that they can. Not everyone feels strongly about lethal controls, and that's basically what council can assist with. So when it comes to pigs, the only real thing that you can do to help yourself without means of some sort of lethal control is fencing, and it can be very expensive, especially needing it to be a certain strength to be, sustain against pigs. They are very strong and they're really good at wrecking things, as we've heard from Heather. So some of the services, some of the services that council can help landholders with is education. That's why we do these type of things. We do education days with landholders. We have equipment, so we have cameras that we can lend to landholders to put up to verify what's been moving around their property, verify if it is actually pigs or not. We have panel traps that we've had some success with, and we have hog hoppers for hog on. We have humane euthanasia. So if you have if you developed your own trap and you are unable to have firearm license or firearms on the property, we have licensed, certified firearms officers. We always have someone on call, no matter what, where it is and what the circumstances are. We will always come and do humane euthanasia. We won't just leave an animal to suffer. So yeah, that's a service that we will provide. And then hog on. Hog on is a certain baiting material. It's done in a hog hopper, and it is quite expensive. So it is a case-by-case basis, and we do a risk analysis and see if the property is suitable. It's not exactly a quick fix, and it doesn't happen overnight. We need to do notifications for your neighbours around your property and that type of thing. So there is a fair bit involved in hog on. It doesn't just happen that afternoon. As with most things in pest management, a fair bit of risk adverseness needs to be looked at before measures go in place. So we've heard about all the good work that's going on out there and how we should all pitch in and buy ourselves a helicopter. But unfortunately, at this stage, this is not an option that Sunshine Coast Council is able to provide. So we've heard helicopter shooting and aerial shooting, and I know out west, I've had experience with conventional 1080 baiting, either in grain. We've done it in watermelons. We've done it in meat, sorghum, all different kinds of grains, all different kinds of vegetables. But the problem with baiting with pigs is that you have to use a higher concentration of that chemical, which Sunshine Coast Council is unwilling to do. We have a hard enough time with the circumstances and the risk analysis around using dog strength poison for wild dogs and foxes. With pig strength, it's 6 times the strength of a dog strength one. So it's just not a risk that we're willing to take for our, not just our native animals being that more concentrated strength, but just also for our domestic dogs that don't often always stay at home where they're supposed to be. So Darren summed it up really well. I really like this kind of demonstration of the problems or the limitations with peri-urban areas. So if you go out west when you have larger properties, you might have one property that's being affected, and you might be able to send one helicopter up, take the pigs off that one property, and you're done. Yes, I understand that this is based on fox. The fact sheet was on foxes, but same premise. Here on the Sunshine Coast, we have smaller blocks. So you might have 31 properties affected, and then you have to notify all of their neighbours and try and get all of them involved. And then you go even further in, and you might be, we'll pick on national parks. National parks is a really big property, and then it has a fringe of urban properties. You now have to get those 175 properties on board because the pig doesn't live in the national park. It kind of visits there when it feels like it and wants to go shopping. Other time, it's over the 175 properties. So it's not always as clear cut as helping one property that's being affected. Animals don't sit still, and they don't always play by the rules, unfortunately, for us. So our main form of control on the Sunshine Coast is trapping. So that also has limitations too. So you can see in one of the photos, our feral baiting specialist has taken a real interest in pig control, and we're using the gates that have remote control triggers. So basically, my guys and gal can sit at home and they see the pigs come in on the camera, and then they can send a command on their phone and it will drop the gate once they're ready. So that's all well and good when it works, and it's all well and good if you have phone reception. When we don't have phone reception, Jesse and the team have been working on this finger gate, which is up in the top photo. So the finger gate works really well. So if you can train the pigs to happily go into the trap and leave it up so that they're comfortable, and then you put the fingers down so that they push against the fingers and then they can't get back out. You still need a land holder or a camera to sit over the trap and check if there's been any captures overnight. So that's one tool that we have been exploring in areas where there's bad or little phone reception for our cameras, but still you need someone that's able to check the trap every 24 hours is the maximum for humaneness. Other options we've been exploring is a Uniden. Uniden is fantastic. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner is one of our recent captures late last year. The Uniden is almost a live feed. So you can have it on your phone and you can watch the animals moving around. You can check them for stress levels. You can check to see if there's anything moving outside the trap before you drop the door. Only problem is it needs reception. But still, technology has come a long way from what it had. The other tool that we're trying to get up and running is the Buckeye. So that's the other little camera device picture there. So the Buckeye actually works with little or no phone reception. So it is it piggybacks and sends a signal on. So we're really keen to get up and going. We're just trying to get through a bit of red tape, and we will get those trialing. So yes, I know it says a feral deer control program. I'm just showing you that the capability that our team also has. So part of the feral deer control program is the boys obviously have thermals on their rifles, and thermals almost make it able to see in the dark. So they're able to see horses from deer, and they can also see pigs. I have a really good photo from the boys. You can actually see a beehive in a tree. So it's amazing what they can see out there and how clearly they can see it. And they're not biased and they're not picky. If there's not deer around and there are pigs, they will take the shot if they have permission on that landholder to do so. I get asked that a fair bit of whether they will turn a blind eye to dogs or other species, and no, if the deer aren't around and there are other priority species on that property and they've got permission to do so by that landholder, they will take out those other pest species as well. Social license. So this is one of the restrictions or limitations we have on the peri-urban areas as well. I'm using the deer as an example again. So we had some dash cam footage sent in about a deer crossing a very busy motorway, and then we sent out a social media about it, warning road users, and then the next day my colleague and I were going to a meeting and we found it dead on the side of the road. So the unfortunate thing with really urban areas is that I think it was Darren mentioned that some people have very differing opinions and ideas of how animals and species should be treated, and their ideals around whether they should be managed or not. So the social license about having a firearm in public areas can be quite contentious, and while we do everything we can in our team to be discreet and respectful, at the end of the day, it's still a job that needs to be done. So how we go around the social license needs to be done with respect, I suppose. So just wrapping up, everything that we do is to promote biodiversity through biosecurity and to protect our community, our landholders, our primary producers, and our environment. Just some of our wonderful partners that we do partner with on varying programs. So I'll stop sharing now and we'll get to some questions. And sorry, I've gone over time. So first question, how do we explain how exclusion fencing reduces numbers? Do you want to take that, Heather or Darren, or do you want me to?
I don't mind. You can have first go at it, Rita, if you want to.
I was only going to be blunt and say that I don't think that it would reduce numbers. It might push them somewhere else, but you might have differing opinions.
I think it depends whether they're inside or outside the fence. So if it's inside the fence, it's having the exclusion fencing there means you can design a control program and locally eradicate feral animals from within the fence. With getting good information around it. But from the outside, they'll just move elsewhere. Darren, do you want to have any? You're on mute, mate.
I agree.
All right. I believe that feral pigs go for protein in the winter months. Is this true? Do any of you have experience with that comment?
Yeah, I'll have a go at that one. They'll go for anything that gives them the highest protein. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's the highest protein. And I think a real trick is people see the rooting and they see the damage, and then all of a sudden that stops. And they go, oh, the pigs have moved on. They've moved away from my property. They haven't gone anywhere. They've just found another food source. And that food source just doesn't mean that they've got to dig it up. So it's just the sign that they leave when they have to dig for that protein. That's all. So it's a real trick, because people go, oh, the pigs have moved on. They're not here anymore. But from all of the collaring data we've done, they're definitely still there. They're just eating something different. But, I reckon you often see logs overturned. They get a bit cold and desperate, carcasses. So, I get the correlation in winter with eating carcasses and to get that protein source.
But the other thing to remember here is that the breeding cycle of pigs is not like they've got a seasonal breeding cycle. It'll be throughout the year. So it's not like they're looking for protein just only in winter. They could be looking for it throughout the year if they're, depending on what they're when they're pregnant. Because so it's not like they've defined breeding times. They can have piglets at any time throughout the year.
Cool. If utilising shooting as a control, what are the options for how to manage the carcasses? So for council, at the moment, we don't really have any agreements in place to utilise the carcasses for anything. A lot of rumours get passed around a lot in the community that we sell them, or that we use the meat to eat ourselves, especially when it comes to deer, and that's never the case. So when we take them off site, we usually take them to the tip and we pay a lot of money to dump them. Deer are a little bit different. If there is a semi-partnership agreement with the landholder, and they want to take care of the carcass and utilize it for whatever means they want, dog food or eating, we tell them where we drop the animal, and then they take it from there. but when it comes to pigs, it's usually taken off site and usually taken to the local tip. And we pay a fair penny for it too, so it's not always an easy one. Do you guys have any other experience in outside of the area with that question? Or
I mean, I understand if it's close to houses and it smells and it's got to be gotten rid of. I totally get it, but just leave them in the bush. Otherwise, they're gone pretty fast. They decompose pretty quick naturally. But totally respecting where you are, that might not be possible. So yeah, you'd have to bury them.
Are individual pigs identifiable? I would say sometimes. What's your take?
I mean, on a lot of the monitoring programs, we really rely on having identifiable pigs so you can do mark recapture and you can see how many times you see that same pig compared to other pigs. So we actually make them identifiable by putting those ear tags in with numbers on them. So can you tell the difference between a black pig and a black pig? Very, very difficult. But if you've got some colour in the pigs or something like that, then yeah, you can do it then. But usually black pigs are black pigs.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Exactly. Spotty pigs or something unique about them. I get asked a fair bit about foxes because that's more my specialty. And yeah, if there's something unique, like they've had their ear ripped or then it's a lot easier. But other than that, has council approached the SSA Farmers Assist program? No, we haven't. We also get asked a fair bit, especially at our shows and that, if council was willing to have recreational farmers on the book, recreational hunters on the books and that type of thing. The short answer is no. All of our full-time employees are fully certified, trained, and sometimes it takes a lot of work to get the trust of our landholders, and it's just not something we usually farm out to contractors or other kind of groups. I hope that answers the question.
That's really good, Rita. Really good. I mean, it's tempting to say bring in the shooters. What you do when you bring in the shooters is you make the pigs smart, you make them wary of people, you make them wary of traps, and all of those other people that are out there trying to make the pigs quiet, trying to get them into their traps, free feeding, doing all of those things. It makes those pigs skittish. Having those shooters that we know respectfully doesn't take out enough of the population actually hampers and impacts on your trapping technique. So I think it's really important. I mean, the way you trap a pig or the way you poison a pig is to make him your friend and free feed and free feed and free feed. And then he goes and brings all his mates in. And then he goes and brings all his mates in. And after 3 weeks, you've all of a sudden got 30 pigs in a trap. I don't know what the scale is up there, but out west. And halfway through that process, if some shooter comes through and gut shots 2 or 3 of them, you've missed out on 30 pigs. In my opinion, keep the shooters away and use them as a very, very last resort.
Yeah, and it also sometimes takes away from the trust for a landholder too. And it's great having stories and versions from you, Heather, and you, Darren, because some of our landholders are exactly that. I've had my friend shooter in. They've taken out a pig. That's really great. That we've done our job. But where there's one pig, there's usually a lot more, unfortunately. So.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, there's stories that I've heard. You might start free feeding 20 pigs. In the end, you might end up with 200. Again, it's about the scale of where you are, but just you think we always underestimate the numbers of pigs in the environment.
All right, if there's no other questions from our audience in that, might thank you, Heather, and thank you, Darren, and might wrap it up. So we've already gone over time. Other questions?
No.
Thank you.
I could just say, oh, sorry, Mark. I could just say if anyone wants to subscribe to our National Feral Pig Action Plan newsletter, the link is on the website. Just or email me. I'm happy to add you on, and any other information you might require as well, in addition to what the council's actually supporting you with.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Rita.
And yeah, I will be. This is being recorded, so we'll get this up on our council webpage so that you can view it at other times as well. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.